doesn't fit. Senator Avery has sawed a board, but in my view, it still doesn't fit into the framework of good public policy, so I will oppose it.
1 minute.
I think the reason they want to present this at a primary rather than a general election is because the conventional wisdom, if you can call anything wisdom related to elections, that more thoughtful people will appear to vote during the primary, and they will read all of this language carefully and be more likely to be snookered than just the run-of-the-mill garden variety citizen who will read this and say it's bad policy. And the garden varieties will turn out more during a general election. Thank you, Mr. President.
I did.
Could penny stocks be invested in under the language of this constitutional language?
It's my opinion they cannot.
Now, the legislature could, through legislation, make it possible to invest in junk bonds and penny stocks, couldn't they?
I think we could.
And that authority is given to the legislature under the language in the constitutional amendment that's before us, correct?
That is correct. I would hope that this body is more prudent.
You'd hope. Would you wish?
I wish.
Might you drop a prayer? In other words, you'd be wishing and hoping and thinking and praying.
And praying.
All I'm trying to do is show that when you draft language of this kind, it's impossible to make everything as rock solid as you'd like. But that's all I'll ask you, Senator Avery. Thank you. I'd like to ask Senator Carlson a question or two.
Senator Carlson, will you yield to a question or two?
Yes, I will.
Senator Carlson, when Senator Friend, acting as president, called on me to speak, he said, Senator Chambers, you're first. And then I made a comment about that. Then you made a comment about the book saying the first shall be last and the last shall be first, correct?
Yes, I did.
Had you heard about this incident where it was the Olympics were in Rome and Italy was not doing well in this long distance race, so this priest ran out beside the guy in first place and told him, brother, the first shall be last. The man was so surprised he lost his stride and in fact did come in last. That was kind of unfair though, wasn't it?
That was kind of dirty, yes.
Okay, thank you, and thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Chambers, you are next, and you're recognized.
Thank you. Mr. President, members of the legislature, Senator Langemeier and I did have good conversations. I don't like these subsidized programs. They cannot make it on their own. But I think I gave Senator Langemeier reason to believe that I'm not going to oppose this bill, and I'm not going to oppose it. Senator DuBois is the reason that I'm on my feet this morning. She drew in one of the worst boondoggles of all, and that's ethanol. Now articles are starting to appear, even in the Nebraska media, pointing out issues that I brought up from the very beginning about ethanol. The high subsidies without which they cannot function. With all of these high public subsidies, they still are not, ethanol still is not priced in a way that shows it can be competitive on its own with petroleum-based products. More petroleum-based fuel and energy must be consumed to produce ethanol than ethanol can ever produce. Ethanol does not give out as much energy as petroleum-based products. So you have something which uses the very kind of fuel that you say you're trying to terminate your reliance upon. And it comes up with a product that produces less energy than that fuel which you say you want to become independent of. Ethanol will never make this country lose its dependence on foreign oil. Biodiesel is not going to do that either. Don't even mention those things and you won't get much return from me. Just say you're trying to find a way to line the pockets of investors and purveyors and speculators in these areas, because that's all that it is. Not all farmers are even going to benefit from what's happening with ethanol. The only way they will is because the price of corn has skyrocketed. So their corn will bring a higher price, not because they have anything directly to do with ethanol. And when that ethanol bubble goes burst, as happened with the Silicon Valley phenomenon, all of these farmers and other purveyors and investors are going to be whining and crying because that sack that is bursting now with gold coins, they think, is going to be a sack from which the bottom had been cut and everything drained out of it, and all they have is an empty sack. Then they're going to be coming to a legislature where I probably no longer will be a member to ask the state to bail them out somehow. And what the legislature will point out is that commodity prices and all of the other things that relate to the production of these grains will be governed primarily by federal programs, and you have to go to your representatives at the federal level to get a handout to be bailed out. There always is a brighter picture painted when one of these, and when I say scams, I put that word in quotes, when one of these scams is to be foisted onto the public. Every single project, whether it's the federal government, state government, or city or county government, every project is always given a glowing, rosy picture, and it never, ever has panned out. Never.
1 minute.
And they never will. I saw where Phillips Conoco, one word, capital P on Phillips and capital C on Conoco, hooking up with Tyson to use animal fats to produce some form of biodiesel. Billions of tons of animal fat are produced, or pounds anyway, and they can be converted to fuel. But the public, which is not paying attention, and members of the legislature, anybody who has ever seen one of these events or read about it will understand why there should be regulation. The activity is not going to be banned. It consists of punching, grappling, wrestling, kicking, and other things that might, to use nice language, allow one combatant to obtain dominance over the other. But you might also say you're trying to inflict as much damage as possible. So what this bill does is to authorize the athletic commissioner to establish rules and regulations that will govern this activity. There will be the regular fees and percentages of the gate charged for these events, as will occur with boxing, wrestling, and other such athletic events. If there would happen to be television coverage, there would be a 5% amount of that would go to the commission. I'm going to read for you the definition of this activity. Since it's the first time it will be defined in statute, it's found on page 10 of the bill. Mixed martial arts, commonly referred to as MMA, means an unarmed combat sport in which two competitors seek to achieve dominance over each other by utilizing a combination of permitted martial arts techniques from disciplines of martial arts, including, but not limited to, grappling, kicking, and striking. Martial arts means any one of the disciplines set forth in rules and regulations adopted and promulgated by the State Athletic Commissioner. This definition contains some general words because you would not want to try to list all of the activities by name that would be covered by the law. Because if you gave a listing, somebody could come up with a similar type of activity, but it's not listed, so it's not covered. So the definition says it includes, but is not limited to, the types of items listed so that you have an idea of what is entailed here. There is other language which I think ought to be read for the record straight from the bill. It would be on page 6. Professional mixed martial arts matches or exhibitions shall not exceed 3 rounds in length except in a championship match, which shall not exceed 5 rounds in length. No round shall be longer than 5 minutes. At least 1 minute shall intervene between rounds. As with boxing and wrestling, a person would have to have gotten a physical, be certified fit physically, and I guess mentally, to engage in this activity. Why do I say mentally? We had some very interesting testimony at the hearing, and we had 2 very clean-cut young men who came in to testify. And by looking at them, listening to them, you would never believe that there are periods in their life when they take complete leave of their senses and become examples of what Darwin's theory talks about before people became altogether upright, put on clothes, came down from the trees, and when they saw each other, they said, "How are you doing? Are things okay with you?" But at any rate, they were able to account and explain to the committee why there needs to be regulation. Sometimes they will have these events take place in a bar, a tavern. There might be a professionally trained fighter who will come to town, and instead of training with people of equal ability, he'll go into one of these bars and they will encourage somebody to get in the ring with him and get his brains beat out. It seems to me that if I were a professionally trained fighter, I would not want to fight against somebody who could not compete with me on roughly the same level. Some of these people experience great injury. Sometimes when one of these events is put on and there's more or less an organized setting, the promoter will get the money and then takes the first thing smoking. So when the participants want their money, or if there's anything to go to the state, there is no money because the dish ran away with the spoon. So as we listened to the testimony, everybody in the room, even those who are not appearing on this bill, could see the need to regulate this activity. There is not going to be a banning of it. We should not want to drive it underground, but by regulating it and allow those who are more or less legitimate, and there's no accounting for taste. The people who want to participate in this activity will be licensed, regulated. One of their members will be put on the Athletic Advisory Committee, and by that I meant somebody who either had participated in this activity or is currently participating, so that expertise is available if the committee should need that. If the sport is regulated, it can help as far as self-policing by helping to root out, if necessary, those underground contests of this kind. But if the public knows that this is deemed a legitimate activity, that the participants are going to have to meet certain requirements, they are licensed, there will be a bond, there will be a referee, they wouldn't have the occasion to go in somebody's basement or garage or tavern and watch what would amount to a slaughter. If you have any questions on any part of it that I have not covered, then I will be willing to take those questions. And I was going to ask if there is anybody in here who had seen a man my age, because we're talking about physical dexterity, stand on a table this high and do a backflip without hands. How many of you have seen a person my age do that? How many of you would like to, it's for this purpose only, how many of you would like to see a person of my age do that? Sometimes we must learn to live with disappointment. Thank you, Mr. President.
I believe the ayes had it. Thank you, Senator Chambers.
Senator Chambers, would you yield?
Senator Chambers, will you yield to a question?
Provided the rules of good sportsmanship are in place, I certainly will.
Well, sounds good to me. I'm not going to jump off of anything, though.
Okay.
Just have to be aware of what the rules are and to take it from there if you're going to prevail or protect yourself.
I think if a person is serious, he would have a manager or somebody who might be advising him, maybe a former fighter or maybe somebody who trains them, but I doubt that a person would just come off the street under these regulatory provisions and be allowed to get into the ring.
But that's probably what's happening in some of the bars and things. Somebody has too
yes.
much to drink. Yeah.
Some of them don't just come off the street, they get up off the floor, where something else John Barleycorn put them on the floor the first time, then John L. Sullivan puts them on the floor the second time when they get in the ring. Thank you. Mr. President, members of the legislature, it sure was a strong temptation to make a play on Senator Nelson's name. You know, full Nelson, half Nelson, but that's in wrestling. We did get some information on the number of states that regulate. It's either 38 or 39. And under the existing law, the bottom age is 16. So Senator Harms had asked those questions, and it's good to get that kind of information into the record. I did do a little research, and the two people who were absent when this bill was being voted on were Senator Adams and Senator Avery. And if you notice, they're both matched up pretty well, age, height, former life. They were actually participating in a master's exhibition of mixed martial arts. And that's about all I wanted to say so that we have everything on the record. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Chambers. Thank you, Senator Chambers.
I do have a question or two for Senator Chambers, if he would yield.
Senator Chambers, will you yield to a couple of questions?
Yes, I will.
Senator Chambers, have you read your bill?
Yes, I have.
Okay. I didn't have any reason to ask you other than that's what you asked, so I thought I would.
I understand.
Now, last Wednesday on LB 701, you submitted 4 amendments, and I believe we had a legislative record vote that day. Chambers, Fisher, and Erdman all agreed on 4 votes in a row, so it'll be interesting to see how this goes today. Thank you.
Okay. There are already what I would call blood sports, and boxing is one of them. There have been men killed in the ring. There's a postage stamp with the picture of Sugar Ray Robinson on it, and he probably, as they say, pound for pound,
1 minute.
was the best fighter who ever was in the ring. He killed a man named Jimmy Doyle, and after the fight, they asked him, "Why didn't you stop when you saw he was in trouble?" Robinson said, "It's my job to put him in trouble." He said, "Well, when he was hurt, why didn't you stop?" He said, "It's my job to hurt him, and it's the referee's job to stop it." So all we can hope is that when these kind of activities do occur, you'll have somebody as a referee or a ringside doctor or individuals in the combatant's corner who will take action to avoid somebody being seriously hurt, if not killed. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you. Mr. President, members of the legislature, although there were some lighthearted comments, we all know this is a very serious matter, and regulation is better than ignoring it or trying to ban it. In the lighthearted vein that Senator Loudon started, but also there's a serious undercurrent, this will not allow men to be battling women in the ring in this activity. Harry Belafonte had a song, which I'm not going to sing. He said, "They say, let us put man and woman together to find out which one is smarter. Some say man, but I say no. The woman has the man beat, they should know. Not me, but the people, they say that the man has always led woman astray. But I say, please listen when I say she's smarter than man in every way." Now, if I sang it, I would have probably gotten applause after I got through for stopping. But in this particular case that we're talking about here, we have to understand that there's so much in this society now that almost desensitizes everybody to violence, from video games to the ongoing wars to the evening news, where there are assaults, there are shootings. Violence is glamorized. Violence is glorified. So if there are young men who are of an aggressive turn of mind, it would be better to let that aggression be channeled. As Senator Fulton correctly pointed out, the martial arts are designed to defend oneself, not to make one aggressive or the initiator of a combat. If anything, the snake the serpent could symbolize what martial arts are about. If you give a snake a way to escape, it will do it. If you corner it and will not allow it to escape, then it will defend itself in the way that it's equipped to do. There is an activity known as jiu-jitsu, and that's where you can put pressure against joints. You can do very painful maneuvers on a person. Judo, on the other hand, is known as the gentle way. You throw a person, you use that person's momentum against himself or herself. And if you have a 200-pound expert in judo against a 100-pound expert in judo, the 200-pounder is going to win every time. This is why when they have these contests, they will have weight categories, because equally trained and proficient individuals are going to contest against people of similar size and weight. I'm hoping that this activity might lead to some people participating who think they know what they're doing, but they will make that first plunge in a setting where they're not going to be crippled, they're not going to be killed, and if it's clear that they ought not be in that ring, somebody will be there with the authority and the responsibility to call it to an end. I was notified that a person's 16-year-old nephew is going to be in one of these contests not too many days hence. There is right now no regulation. This bill, once it takes effect and the Commission does its work of drafting rules and regulations, we can hope that somebody as young as 16 who would be allowed to participate will be restricted to a category of participants who are not so far and above this person in ability and size that you can count on somebody being injured. Madam President, that's all I have to offer on the bill, and I will accept a machine vote. Thank you.
Discussion on the advancement of LB 404. Senator Chambers, your light is first.
Madam President, members of the legislature, this bill is bad policy. There's more than one way to kill a bill. If you've got a horse out there and it runs pretty fast, but you don't want it to win the race, you put a heavy jockey on that horse. If you wanted to kill, but maybe you all want this bill, the best thing to do is to leave it in an unacceptable condition. Then nobody's going to vote for it. There has not been a compelling case made for this bill. I have supported salary increases, and I got some salary increases for all the constitutional offices, disregarding whoever may have been occupying the office at the time, because the responsibilities that attached to the office justified compensation in excess of what then was allowed under the law. This is an entirely different set of circumstances. I voted against reducing the amount because if the amount had remained at the original level, the bill had no chance. Maybe people think this is good policy. Maybe they think it's a bad policy, but it'll be less bad if they reduce the amount. Here's what it's like. The knife was in 6 inches, so you pull it out 3 inches. And what have you done? You've prolonged the agony. I'm not going to kill this bill by the exercise of the 1,000 cuts. If people think this is a good bill, and if people think it'll survive the governor, and they think that these people, based on the work that they do and the nature of the work of that commission, which, by the way, often has taken decisions contrary to the interests of various communities, then they can give them a raise. But this is not like the typical office where things are being done on a day-to-day basis that will affect the day-to-day lives of large numbers of people. What they do can affect the life of people in a community by saturating it with liquor licenses, as happens in the area where I live. My community, Senator Carlson, is cursed by two blights: churches and liquor establishments. And both of them deal in spirits. And I can't say which spirit does more damage. Now, I've heard of people with one spirit in them that incapacitated them if they're in a war and they can't carry out the killing. But that other spirit will take hold of people, and they not only will be in war, but they'll commit some of the worst atrocities imaginable. So, there's no way that the legislature is going to restrict the number of churches. But there might be something that the legislature can do to give a message to indicate that saturation of neighborhoods with liquor licenses and establishments is not the thing to do. There are certain communities which will never have to worry about what I'm talking about. There are other communities which are dumping grounds for all of these things. Then when the attendant social evils occur, the community is condemned and low-rated. But put all of that liquor in other communities, and you will see what happens there also. Why are they so careful to keep them out of certain communities? Because they know the harm that follows them. I don't think that this bill ought to be enacted into law, and I shall vote against it. Thank you, Madam President.